Next, two stories on the changing Middle East. First, from Cairo, Margaret Warner reports on the most potent political force in Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood.
Cairo's Al Farouk Hospital is a busy place, welcoming 800 to 1,000 people a day. It was built more than 20 years ago, not by the government or a private charity, but by the Muslim Brotherhood, Egypt's oldest and most well-established Islamic movement. The Brotherhood operates 21 such hospitals throughout Egypt, providing modern medical care at subsidized prices. Local resident Mohammed Ramadan is hugely grateful to his neighborhood's benefactor.
I come here because I like the way the Brotherhood runs it. There's no stealing or corruption, unlike the hospitals run by the government.
Now the Muslim Brotherhood, long confined to only social and religious service, could soon become the dominant force in the government. Since the ouster of President Hosni Mubarak 7 months ago, all Islamist movements are free to take part in politics. The Brotherhood quickly formed a political wing, the Freedom and Justice Party, to compete in November's parliamentary elections. Though campaigning is not officially permitted yet, its banners hang throughout Cairo. But the party is taking it slowly. It's pledged to restrict itself to running in only half of Egypt's districts this time.
We need a stable, concrete majority for building the new democratic era.
Former Brotherhood leader Essam El Arian, now vice president of the party, says the Brotherhood won't try to attain a majority on its own, but he hopes that the wider Democratic Alliance for Egypt that they've joined will.
We are not going to have only a majority in the incoming parliament, but we aiming and targeting to have more than 30 or 35 seats. And with our alliance, we can achieve majority.
So why would the Muslim Brotherhood, so much better known, financed and organized than any other group throughout Egypt, put any restriction on itself? The reasons are both practical and strategic. Analyst and writer Amr Hamzawi says despite its advantages, the Brotherhood knows its limits and what the country and the world will accept.
They know quite well that they do not have, in terms of calibers and skills, enough people to rule Egypt on their own. And they have a clear understanding of the fact that the international environment, nor the regional environment, can take an Egypt which is dominated by Islamists as of now. And they have patience. I mean, that movement has been out for 80 years. They know how to be patient when they play politics.
The Egyptian voters they're appealing to are 90% Muslim and 10% Coptic Christian. Though most are religiously pious, lifestyles here run the gamut. The recent rally in Tahrir Square sported women in Technicolor headscarves and black abayas, men in everything from T-shirts to full beards. And a Philadelphia Phillies fanatic a long way from the South Side leading prayers. We heard plenty of concern about the Brotherhood's political advantages over the secular parties and their aims.
The only political force that has a real platform or experience is the Brotherhood. So it's really not fair for them to be competing against these other parties, which need to be given a fair chance.
40-year-old mother Inez Ali was worried about the Brotherhood's social agenda.
This is not the Islamic. They want to take the country to Iran and to the hell, I don't know where.
Ridiculous, said the Freedom and Justice Party's El Arian.
That is the wrong perception. We are not going to impose any model of Islam for the people. Egyptian people are Muslims and Christians and religious and obeying and obedient for their faithful beliefs without any compulsory power.
That may be El Arian's own view, says analyst Hamzawi, but other Brotherhood members do want government to enforce the Islamic Code of Sharia more strictly.
Where there are tensions, where there are disagreements within the movement and between the movement and its constituencies, its crowd out there in Egyptian society, is with regard to Sharia, the place of Sharia in Egyptian politics. Are they going to be happy with the reference which we've had before? Principles of Sharia, of the Islamic law, represent the major source of legislation, or are they going to push for an implementation, a full-fledged implementation of Sharia?
Though the Brotherhood stuck together during 90 years of repression, now other splits are emerging. Abdulmonem Abdel Fattah, for decades a top Brotherhood figure, was expelled early this summer for defying the movement's decision not to enter the presidential election to come. He thinks the extent of Sharia influence in Egypt now is just fine.
I don't think that there is a lot to change. We're going to turn Egypt into an Islamic state? This is extremist talk.
Why is that extremist talk?
What the extremist groups say now is that Egypt was not Islamic, and it's time to turn to Islam again, and I disagree with that. I believe that Islamic civilization came after the Coptic Christian civilization, and before that, the pharaohs. The Egyptian people are tolerant and accept others, so we are not remaking Egypt. What we want to do is fix it.
Though the presidential election is after the November parliamentary one, Fattah's aides are already drawing up a campaign for the digital age. He has more than a dozen offices countrywide and thousands of volunteers, some ex-Brotherhood. But former colleague El Arian dismisses the threat posed by this split. Do you think there's any difference between the so-called old guard of the Muslim Brotherhood in terms of your vision of the new Egypt and the, quote, new guard?
I am old. Am I old? When the people know the real perception about Muslim Brotherhood, they will discover that the majority of the group are under 30 years old.
One thing Abdel Fattah and El Arian do agree on, the really hardline Islamic agenda is being pushed by the fundamentalist Salafist movement. On July 29th, millions of conservative Islamists flooded Tahrir Square in a show of force that alarmed many in Egyptian society. Leading the charge were Salafists, whose sect reveres a 7th century interpretation of Islam.
Salafis aren't calling for theocracy. We're calling for a civilian Islamic state.
36-year-old architect Mahmoud Fatih is planning to run from the Salafist party he co-founded, Al-Fadila, or Virtue. He says Sharia law eventually should be far more vigorously enforced.
We're calling for Sharia to be implemented in stages. We'd be mindful of the climate. If people then cross the red lines, then they'll be punished.
And that punishment could include cutting off the hand of a thief. Do you think ultimately that's the best way to protect society from thieves and to prevent people from stealing?
Of course. Of course.
Would you require women to cover their hair?
Okay, listen. إحنا حزب سياسي.
On the veiling of women, we would defer to expert institutions. If they say women should be wearing the veil, then the state will encourage that. And if women say they don't want to wear the veil, then we'd ask the institution, what is the punishment?
El Arian dismisses the Salafist message and prospects.
Egyptians are moderate people, tolerant people. I think even if other extremists from any side go to the politics, they cannot win more than 5 to 7%.
But analyst Hamzawi isn't so sure.
Radical groups, radical interpretations win, especially in moments of uncertainty, of instability. And we are going through a phase of uncertainty and instability in Egypt. Yes, it's not a radical country, but that has very little to do with moderation or lack of moderation in politics. That's a different issue.
Soon, Egyptians, for the first time in their history, will have the chance to decide how much and in what way Islam will guide their country's future.
In her next story, Margaret profiles 3 revolutionaries who found different paths after the Spring Uprising.